Hey everyone, this is David Brown. Today is June 26th, 2024, and I'm out hiking in the Tiadaghton State Forest along Armstrong Road. I've walked just around a quarter of a mile up the road just to get away from the traffic noise. Armstrong Road comes off of Route 15 as it cuts up towards Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and actually this stretch of the mountain that I'm going to be hiking is directly across from the borough of Montoursville, which is my hometown. And this is a site that I've birded once or twice in the winter time. They open the gate in the winter and you can drive it, and I know my family and I have done it before on Christmas bird counts and haven't had much, but this is my first time visiting here in the summer, so I'm really excited to explore and see what birds and plants and geological oddities I can find here. This summer is the first year of the Pennsylvania Bird Atlas, so that's part of what I'm doing. I want to get out here and put in some eBird checklists with the breeding codes, but also I'm having a lot of fun this summer exploring new areas, just doing a lot of hiking and trying to learn more about plant identification and other parts of nature as well. So I've been doing a ton of iNaturalist and just really going out and exploring, and you never know what you're going to see when you go out. Here's a tree that will probably be very common throughout this hike. This is striped maple, Acer pennsylvanicum. You can see it's relatively small, and that's typical for this species, and they have really big leaves, and it's something that we see a lot in this part of Pennsylvania. And also taking a look down below, the habitat here is very rocky, and up ahead on the map there's a feature called the Devil's Turnip Patch. And the pin is up here, and there seems to be some confusion on what the actual turnip patch is, because farther down Route 15, as you're driving along the highway, you pass a big boulder field that some sources online claim that that's the Devil's Turnip Patch. But I'm going to keep an eye out for that to see if I can find this cool geologic formation. Here, right along the side of the path, we have an interesting plant. This is catnip, Nepeta cataria. And I bet if I took some of this home, my cats would love it. There's still quite a bit of traffic noise, but so far the birds that I'm hearing have mainly been a few red-eyed vireos, ovenbirds, scarlet tanager. There was one indigo bunting right at the parking lot, and a mourning dove. But I'm going to keep going and see if I can get away from all the traffic. Just up ahead here, there's a blue-headed vireo singing, and if I look to the right, there is a power line cut that heads up onto the top of the mountain. Looks like it might be hikeable. I'm not going to try that today, but it's always something to keep in mind. Looks pretty rocky, and there's quite a bit of vegetation, some mountain laurel and stuff. Doesn't look like it would be too bad to hike. And also here, there's one of my favorite plants, which is sweet fern, Comptonia peregrina, which is a native species, but it is not actually a fern. But I think it's just real pretty the way the leaves are. Speaking of ferns, here among all this Japanese stilt grass, we have some ebony spleenwort growing. Whenever you're out hiking and you see a hairy looking vine like this, you need to be careful because it is probably poison ivy. And as we look up, we can see the poison ivy leaves and berries as well. And speaking of berries, here we have wineberry, which is one of the brambles, and pretty soon these should be opening up and revealing the berries or the fruit, which are actually very similar looking to raspberries. And I guess these are edible. I was watching a video about this species last night. I've never tried eating them. I'm real hesitant to eat anything in the woods, although I've also been seeing a lot of very tasty blueberries as I've been hiking. But this wineberry species is pretty distinctive, and I've been seeing a lot of it out here. Here we have some more common ferns that you'll see while you're out hiking. This is sensitive fern. There's also a little bit more ebony spleenwort hiding over here. And then just over here, there is Christmas fern, which is one of the evergreens. So you'll see this one even in the winter. Unlike the sensitive fern, which is called sensitive because the fronds die off pretty quickly at the first frost. The vine climbing up this tree is Oriental Bittersweet, which is non-native and is fairly distinctive to identify. A lot of the leaves are very rounded, but there's also other ones that come to a very pointed tip, but pretty distinctive from the other vines that we see in this area. This spot caught my eye because you have an area of green here that's mostly Japanese stilt grass, but it's quite the contrast from the rest of the surrounding forest that has almost no ground cover at all, and I suppose it's probably just a wetter area. You can see there is a pipe here and a little bit of a seep that runs through. Looking at some of the other species here, we're seeing more of the striped maple. This tree here in front of me is actually a black tupelo tree. And there's also a really cool fern here. If I did try to zoom in on one, it's called rattlesnake fern. So you can see the fertile fronds sticking up there, and then the sterile fronds are actually down below. But there's quite a bit of it down here as I zoom in, and it's one of my favorite ferns, and if I get a closer look at it along the path, I'll definitely show it. Yesterday I had some really nice looks at them over on Skyline Drive, which is on this next mountain over just on the other side of the highway. All right, here on the other side of the path, I did find a closer rattlesnake fern. So here's what the sterile fronds look like. Very lacy looking, and then you have the actual fertile part up here. We'll see if we can get the camera to focus on it. So you can see that this is where all of the spores would come from with the sori up here. So a really cool looking fern, and you can see there's also some Christmas fern surrounding it. I'm filming today using a new iPhone that I just got yesterday, and I'm getting a new laptop as well. So I'm hoping that will allow me to make some higher quality videos and be able to edit more easily HD and 4K videos. So let me know what you think of this new format of video. It's a little bit different from a lot of the bird videos I make where I just go through my photos and talk in that way. But for showing plants in the summertime, I kind of like this format. Here's another non-native species that I see quite a bit of when I'm out hiking. This is Japanese barberry. And if I zoom in here, give you a closer look at the leaves and the fruit. And also they get the name because of these very sharp barbs that they have. So this is something you definitely don't want to be walking through. Here's where another pipe lets water come through, and we see the same thing we saw before, that the area just gets overtaken with the Japanese stilt grass. Here's some wineberry that's growing right along the path. So let me zoom in and give you a closer look at the leaves and the fruit of this bramble species. Here we have another striped maple tree, and on this one we can see that it has the winged fruit, the samaras, hanging down. And I was watching a video last night that reminded me of a crazy fact about this species, which is that it can switch back and forth between being male and female. Well, I've been making pretty slow progress. I don't know how far I'm going to make it today, and I saw this interesting dip here. I thought it might be where another pipe comes through, but I don't see any. But if we look down ahead, it's this big grassy strip, and actually this is pointing directly at where the label on Google Maps is for the Devil's Turnip patch. So I'm very tempted to walk along this and see if I can find that unique rock formation. It's a formation of rocks that were dumped by the glaciers, and apparently they have like a purplish color to them, and also there is apparently a hidden stream that runs underneath them. So if it's quiet, you can hear the sound of running water. I'm going to give it a try, and normally I would be very hesitant to do something like this going off path where no one knows where I am, but I am in an area that has cell phone coverage, and so I'm not worried about getting lost, or I could always call for help if something were to happen. The grass isn't too high. I do have my pants tucked into my socks like I always do. Maybe I'd feel a little better about it if I had my muck boots on, but I'll be careful about ticks, and hopefully there's no snakes down here. But I'll just follow this for a little bit and see where it goes and see if we can find the Devil's Turnip patch. Okay, I got through the grassy part and the trail continues, but it is clear, and I'm just going to follow it as long as it goes. I think this may be some sort of mountain biking trail. I know I was looking at the map and there were some trails marked in this area that go across over to the highway, so we'll see where this leads to. As I'm walking, I'm passing some mountain laurel, but unfortunately they're pretty much out of bloom. Yesterday I was still seeing some that had flowers, but I think we're maybe a week or two past the peak blooming time. Okay, the trail turned left a little bit and now it's heading downhill. We're coming into an area, again, we have a lot of mountain laurel, but there's also beginning to be some white pines. We see some small ones here and then a bigger eastern white pine here in front of us as well. So maybe a little bit different habitat. We'll see if we get any different birds. I can hear a black-throated green warbler singing as I'm talking. All right, well, we've come to the bottom of the trail. We can see some traffic of Route 15 there in the background. And we see that the trail continues both left or right. And the pin for the Devil's Turnip Patch is to the right. So I'm going to go that way and see where that leads. Now, when you come to a situation like this, it's always good to make sure that you know where to turn back. This is a pretty obvious trail that I just came down, but I'll probably put a stick or something just so I know where to make the turn. Plus this multi-trunked tree right here is really distinctive. That'll be a good landmark for finding my way back. All right, well, this is the area where the pin for the Devil's Turnip Patch is. So I think the pin is probably just located at the wrong spot because I don't see anything too distinctive about this area right here. So I think it is that very rocky, basically a big pile of rocks along the highway a little farther down. So I hope to get there someday and make a video, but I think I'm going to continue down this trail for now and see where this leads. I don't think it goes too much farther. I apologize for the highway noise, but I just found a really cool plant. This is ghost pipe, Monotropa uniflora, and this plant, you can see, does not have any green. It does not contain any chlorophyll because it is parasitic, getting its energy from fungi. Well, up ahead, the path turns into grass again, so I probably won't continue that way, but over here, there's a nice little pond, so I might check this out for a few minutes and see if I can find any different plants or anything interesting. It seems like there's a lot of mosquitoes, so I probably won't stick around too long, but just an interesting little spot here right along the highway. All right, well, I fought my way down there, and not too much interesting. There's some sphagnum mosses, there's some water horehounds, and there's a lot of Japanese stiltgrass. And here we have a hemlock tree. Okay, I'm back at the intersection. We see this big multi-trunked tree, and I'm gonna follow the path to the left just to see where this goes for a little bit. There are a couple more small patches of ghost pipe here. Just such a cool parasitic plant. Well, I decided I would go until I found one more cool thing, and you probably can't see it that well. I think it just moved, but there is a fledgling ovenbird here in the bush right along the highway. So kind of an interesting spot for an ovenbird. There's definitely a lot of them that are in here that have been singing, and but you would think they would be more in the deep woods and not right next to the highway. And pretty sure that they nest on the ground. They have a nest that looks like an oven. So here he is hopping around. What a cute little thing. And this will definitely be going in for the PA Bird Atlas. I'm heading back uphill towards the main road of Armstrong Road, but I came across this large fungus that I must have walked right by on my way down, but this is pretty cool. And I'll put here's my boot for comparison, so you can tell it's fairly large. I don't know much about fungi, and so I don't know what this is, but very cool looking. And every time I see one, I take a photo for iNaturalist, so hopefully other people know what they are and can post the ID. Here we have a chestnut oak tree. You can see the bark is kind of furrowed with lots of ridges, and it's a fairly tall tree. But the reason I wanted to point it out is if we look at the bark, we see a couple different things. First of all, we see these masses of eggs. If we zoom in there on that. And there's also these shell-like things that are on the tree. And these are signs of the spongy moth, formerly known as the gypsy moth, which is an invasive non-native species that really causes a lot of problems for some of our native trees. And we can just see that there's a lot of them all over the trunk of this chestnut oak. All right, that's where I just hiked up, and now I'm back on Armstrong Road, and it was quite the uphill climb there at the end, and I'm all sweaty and sticky, but it's only about 8:20 a.m., so I'm going to continue on down Armstrong Road, at least to where it curves. I was expecting to get a lot farther than that today, but obviously you can see the bugs swarming in front of the camera. Yeah, not sure how much longer I want to be out, maybe a few more hours. I'll continue on down the road and see what we can see. Here's a cool plant. This is called broad-leaved helleborine. You can see the leaves there. And as we come up and look at the flowers, we see that this is actually a species of orchid. And it is a non-native species, but I believe this might be the only orchid that we would really see out here. So it's always a cool thing to come across. It's a little bit different than anything else we're seeing in the woods here. Here's a switchback that cuts up the mountain, and this is a trail that you could take, and who knows where it leads. It's just one of these endless trails that you could consider taking, and maybe someday I'll get back here and hike this trail, but it's a little grown up with vegetation, especially here at the beginning, so I'm gonna stick to the main road. Here's a tree species I've been keeping an eye out for. This is an American chestnut tree. You can see these really long leaves that have teeth to them. And this is a fairly large chestnut. You can see it's quite tall as well. The top of the tree seems to be completely dead, no foliage growing, but down here on the lower branches, it at least does have some amount of foliage. This tree, despite its size, does not appear to be flowering at all. And chestnuts are a tree that used to be one of the most numerous trees in the forest in certain parts of Pennsylvania. And then the chestnut blight came and essentially wiped them all out, except for ones that still sprout from the old root system. So we see a lot of quite small ones in the mountains here in this region of north central PA. This is definitely on the larger end of the ones that we see. But like I said, this one looks like it's kind of struggling. So I always like to document these trees just because it's something that's a little bit special to see when you're out hiking. Just a little farther down the road here, we have another American chestnut, and this is more typical of what we see, just these small understory trees. Here's a plant I'll have to look up later. I put it into iNaturalist and it's calling it Eastern Wild Indigo. So this is a species I'm not really familiar with. I've probably seen it before, but I just don't know much about it. I'll have to look it up. Here's a plant you may be familiar with. This is common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. And milkweed's probably best known for its association with the monarch butterfly, and you can see this one is in full bloom right now. And it's very common to see milkweed growing along the edges of roads like this. And next to it we have a somewhat related plant that is a bit more spreading. This is hemp dogbane. All right, and we're finally rounding the corner of Armstrong Road. You can see there's a little parking pool out here. Scarlet Tanager was singing, although he's gone quiet for the moment. There's also a trail that cuts up into the woods here, the Muncie Point Trail. I'll have to look that up on a map. It looks doable. It looks like it's an actual trail, not too overgrown. So again, one of these trails to consider trying another day. And this is kind of a special stretch for me because when I look out my window of the house I grew up in, I'm looking towards this stretch of the mountain. So this kind of feels like a home mountain range to me, although like I said earlier, I haven't really spent much time up here, so excited to see what I can find. Here we have a tall plant that has very soft and fuzzy leaves. This is Great Mullein, Verbascum thapsus. And if I focus in here on the flowers, you'll see they're rather large yellow flowers. And there's a lot of insects crawling all over this plant. I had some beetles, and I had a jumping spider who might be hiding right now. Here's another fern growing along the side of the road, and this is ostrich fern. You can see it's relatively large. It has these long fronds that get pretty skinny towards the base, and they grow in a circular form. Here's another tree that I see a lot while I'm out hiking in this part of Pennsylvania. You can see it's a relatively small tree, and it's got these rounded leaves. This is common witch hazel. Here's another common tree of this area. This is a sassafras tree, and here we have the three different shapes of leaves. So you have the ones like this that are completely undivided. You have the one shaped like a mitten, where you have the thumb and the fingers, and then you have the ones that are kind of the double mitten, where it's symmetrical. And these trees are usually relatively small. I mean, you can see this one's not super small, but usually they're a tree of the understory, at least when I see them. I just came upon this gate here that leads down to some sort of old forest road, although it looks pretty overgrown. I'm not sure it would even be drivable, even with a good vehicle. But it might be an interesting road to hike, and I'm curious where it goes, because if you actually stay on the road here, I've seen directions online. It tells you where you can cut off this trail and walk down the mountain and actually come across an old plane crash site. Decades and decades ago, there was a passenger plane that crashed out of the Williamsport Regional Airport, killing everyone on board except for one person. And I think around 15 years ago, some people decided to go and find it, and there's actually an informational sign there now and still some of the wreckage from the plane crash. So that might be a hike for another day to try to find that. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but we have a scarlet tanager singing from high up in the trees here somewhere. Again, please comment and let me know what you think of this style of video. I know it's different from the birding style videos, but I really think to have a full understanding of birds, we need to have an understanding of their habitats. And I think the only real way to get that is to be out in the field a lot, do a lot of hiking, and just see what you see. You learn to identify the trees that are around you, the different plants, the insects, and I think it's just a lot of fun being out here and seeing what you can discover. If you continue a few more miles down the road here, you actually come to an area that has some big boulder fields that I guess you have to hike down the mountain a bit to get to them. But I'd like to do that someday, just because they're something that growing up, just driving around town, you'd look up at the mountain and you see these huge boulder fields. One of them's kind of shaped like an arrow. And it's just one of these things I've grown up with my whole life, but I've never actually traveled there to see what it's like in person. So that's another hike I'd like to do out here. Here we have the singing of a red-eyed vireo, one of the most common birds that we have in the woods here, and you just hear them sing pretty much all day in the summer. Very difficult to see sometimes. They tend to stay up high in the trees, but it's the main sound we're hearing as we hike in the woods here, but also hearing a good number of ovenbirds and smaller numbers of things like black-throated green warblers, black-throated blue. Heard at least one black and white warbler, so there's a good mix of birds throughout here. We have two different oak trees that are growing right next to the road here. This one I believe is a white oak from looking at the leaves. So you can see it has some texture to the bark, but it's not a really deep ridging compared to if we look at this tree over here, which is a little bit smaller around. But this is a chestnut oak, and we can see it has those really deep ridges to the bark. It's a very distinctive style. And of course, if we get a look at the leaves, they're different. Those are not the leaves. That's some Virginia creeper that's climbing up the tree. There are a lot of oak leaves scattered around the ground, and it's hard to know which tree they came from, but this is a chestnut oak leaf here, and you can see it's in pretty rough shape. I believe that might be from the spongy moths. And you can see the overall shape of it. It doesn't have the deep lobes like the other oaks do. And here we have a white oak leaf. You can see that it's got the deeper lobing, but it's still rounded around the edges. And if I remember correctly from the photos I saw, I think this is the spot where you can actually hike down the mountain to find that plane crash site. But looking down here at how thick it is this time of year, I'm certainly not going to do it today, and I'm hesitant to try it at all this time of year. But somewhere just down the hillside here, and it seems like it's a pretty steep hike. This is where you could get to that plane crash. And I think reaching this point, I'm going to turn around now, but I'll keep an eye out for anything interesting on the hike back. As I'm walking back here, I noticed one more American chestnut that I had not noticed on the hike in. And you can see this one's relatively tall. I don't know, maybe 30 feet or so. And I can't tell if there's just one tree. I see some leaves over here as well. I think they might just be part of the same tree. Sometimes you'll get little clumps of them. Oh, actually, and looking over here, there's actually another chestnut here at this smaller diagonal trunk that's sticking up there. So yeah, a couple American chestnuts hidden here along the road. I've only done about 50 iNaturalist entries for today, which is a lot less than other recent hikes where I've been doing a couple hundred. So I think as I walk back, if I'm seeing anything I didn't put into iNaturalist yet today, I'm going to try to enter it. And I think that doing videos like this and also doing things like iNaturalist are a good way just to record what the habitat was like here, because if there's one thing we know about nature, it's that things are always changing. And if you come back in 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years, this could look completely different and have completely different plant species. Things that are here now might be gone, or other things may have moved in. So it's just a different way to hopefully document the plants and other things that are around. So in the future, other people can look back and see what it was like here in 2024. This conifer tree here is an eastern hemlock. And we have a smaller one here along the road that this might be a good opportunity for me to show you that most of our hemlocks, if you look at them, you see these white fuzzy things here on the branches. And that's a sign of the hemlock woolly adelgid or adelgid. And this is an insect that is non-native that was introduced and is damaging a lot of the hemlock trees here in Pennsylvania and other states. I really have to say I've been learning so much just by going out and doing these hikes, and maybe you're interested in learning about nature the same way I am. And my recommendation would be to just go out and use iNaturalist. It's an app you can download on your phone and just take pictures of the different plants and other parts of nature that you see. iNaturalist will attempt to identify it based on the picture and will offer suggestions. And also, when you submit a sighting, other people can add the correct identification if you misidentified it. So it's a really good way. It gets you out there and paying attention to all of the different things that you're seeing. And I've been learning so much. I go out, and every time I go out, I see something different. And then when I get home, I look it up. So that would be my recommendation. Just do a lot of iNaturalist, and you're going to forget. You're going to see a plant, take a photo. Next time you see it, you probably won't remember what it was. But you do that over and over again, and you begin to learn the most common species. And once you really start to get a handle on the common species, that's when you'll start to notice the things that are different. You'll be walking along and you'll say, oh, I've never seen that flower before. And you'll go over and put it into iNat, and it'll be a new species for you that you get to learn. So you could literally do that the rest of your life at one spot or many different spots. There's so much to learn about in nature, and it's just so much fun to be out here hiking in the woods of Pennsylvania and seeing what I can find. Here's a plant that has one of the most beautiful flowers that we have. This is Deptford Pink, which is non-native, but I just love the pink flowers with a little bit of speckling to them. This is Dianthus armeria, Deptford Pink. I keep seeing a bunch of this ebony spleenwort as I'm hiking, and I just can't get over how beautiful of a fern it is. One more tree worth mentioning is here we have an ash tree, and my ash tree identification isn't the best, but I believe this would be a white ash. And ash trees have been hit really hard in Pennsylvania and surrounding states by the emerald ash borer. So it's a species that obviously we're still getting, but a lot of the larger trees have been wiped out just over the past decade or so. I was walking along and noticed that in this striped maple tree, if we look up, there is a bird's nest hanging down. And based on this kind of hanging nest, I believe this would probably be Baltimore Oriole. I don't see any birds around it right now. It looks like a used nest, but just an interesting thing to note. Passing all this catnip again on the way out, I had a funny thought. You always hear these rumors of mountain lions wandering Pennsylvania, and you have to wonder if mountain lions enjoy catnip as much as your pet cat does. And one final plant I just came across, I put this into iNaturalist, and it's calling it moonseed. And I'm pretty sure this is something I've never seen before. So that'll be my homework for tonight, is looking this up and learning all about it. All right, I wanted to give some final thoughts before I get too close to the traffic noise. This was a new style of video that I'm testing. It's a little bit different than all the birding videos, but I'm really enjoying getting out here and hiking north central Pennsylvania and beyond. I'm sure I made some mistakes in this video, and it's a topic I'm not super familiar with the same way that I am with birds, for example. So I'm trying to learn as I go and teach the things that I know. But if you find any mistakes that I made, feel free to correct me. I'm definitely open to learning, and every time I'm out here hiking, I'm coming across so many new plants and insects that I've never seen before. So it's been a lot of fun. Leave a comment and let me know what you think of this style of video. I know there's probably some refining to the style that I'll have to do, but that's what you got to do. You got to get frequent before you get good at something. So I'm hoping to make more videos of this same style, chronicling my different adventures of hiking and birding throughout Pennsylvania and surrounding states. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.